chapter 18, texts 40 to 45, and we'll focus on the purport of text 40. Before we get to that, I'll just give a little background because maybe some of you don't come to these classes regularly and you might be a little lost if we don't put it in the context. So this is a very interesting pastime. It's one of the most dynamic stories of the Srimad Bhagavatam, full of drama and emotion and conflict and hurt feelings. And this is very interesting. So this whole ninth canto, most of it is describing the dynasties, because Srimad Bhagavatam is a Purana, right? It's called the Bhagavat Purana, the Amala Purana. So Purana means the histories, ancient histories. And in any history book, you probably remember if you studied history in school, you hear about all the dynasties, all the kings, all the presidents, all the prime ministers of the different countries and what they did, their achievements, their downfalls, their, all these things. So, like any history book, Srimad Bhagavatam also describes the histories of great kings and leaders and their dynasties. But Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's focused on the Lord, then the dynasties that it describes are, first of all, in the ninth canto, we hear about the solar dynasty, which leads to the appearance of Lord Ramachandra. And now we're hearing about the different descendants in the lunar dynasty, which is leading to the appearance of Lord Krishna. And before that, we heard about all the different Manvantaras, all the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu and his descendants, and with the focus being on the different incarnations of the Lord that appeared in those dynasties, right, like Lord Kapila Dev. So Srimad Bhagavatam is adhering to all the conventions of a Purana, but focusing on the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, the dynasties in which the Lord appears. So this is what's going on here. So we're going through the different generations of the lunar dynasty, and we've come to Nahusha, the sons, the descendants of Nahusha. So that's how this chapter starts out. And one of those, the first one is Yati. So Nahusha's oldest son Yati, he was supposed to become the king after Nahusha could no longer be the king, but he declined to accept that post because he thought it would be distracting from self-realization, and he just wanted to renounce. So then the next younger brother, Yayati, became the king. Okay, so then just a little context. So Shukracharya is the priest of the demigods. So he's a very powerful, one of the most powerful and respected Brahmins in the universe, being the chief priest of the demigods. And he had a daughter named Devayani. So one day Devayani, when she was a young girl, maybe she was a teenager, she was out, just out going for a stroll with her friends. And one of her friends' name was Sharmista. So Sharmista, she was the daughter of a Kshatriya, the king, named Rishaparva. And anyway, so there are a bunch of the girls, teenage girls, out for a walk. It's a hot day. They come across a nice lake full of lotuses, warm breezes, trees, and they think, oh, let's go for a little dip. So then they weren't planning to go swimming. They didn't bring their bathing suits. So they just thought, well, no one's around, no one comes here. This is a totally remote place. Let's just go skinny dipping, basically. I don't know if you use that word in Canada, but in America. So they took off all their clothes, they went in the water, and they're swimming. So then in the distance, one of them sees, oh no, someone's coming. And it happens to be Lord Shiva, along with Parvati, riding on the bull Nandi. And they're like, oh no, not is it only someone coming, it's a male person coming. And not only any male person, but it's Lord Shiva. And here we are naked in the water. This is totally inappropriate. We need to get out quick and get dressed, become, presentable. So they jump out of the water and they're just putting on their clothes as quickly as possible. And in the anxiety of trying to get dressed quickly, Sharmista by mistake puts on the dress of Devayani. So then Devayani sees that and she becomes angry because Devayani is a daughter of a Brahmin, so she's a Brahmini, and whereas Sharmista is the daughter of King Vishaparva, so she's a Kshatrini, and so Devayani has a little bit of pride that, how dare you put on my clothes? You're just a lowly Kshatriya. you people take advice from us, we guide you, we are the spiritual masters. My father is the spiritual master of your father. Who do you think you are to put on my clothes? So then she gets angry and she insults her. And so Sharmista, she's Kshatrini. So Kshatrinis, they don't take insults well, right? They fight back. So then when Sharmista was insulted, then she turned around and she said, well, you think you're so great, but your father comes begging at my house, because that's what the Brahmins do. They go door to door begging alms. But the idea is not that they're beggars, but they're going to actually give spiritual knowledge to the householders. Anyways, Sharmista says, your father comes begging at my door for food. If it wasn't for us, your whole family would starve. So who's higher? And then she gets angry. So after saying that, she actually pushes Devayani into a well. So now Devayani's, and she wasn't even dressed yet. She was totally still naked because Sharmista had put on her clothes. So here's naked little Devayani in the bottom of a well. And after pushing her, Sharmista, she's so fried with Devayani, she just goes, she just leaves her there. So they all go home, and Devayani's stranded there, and she's thinking, what is going to happen? And then Yayati comes on the scene, and he's a king, so he's been out hunting, and he's thirsty, so he sees a well. And he's like, oh, there's a well, there must be water in the well, I'll get a drink. So he goes down there, he looks into the well to see if there's any water, and there he sees this beautiful, undressed girl, and he's like, whoa. So he immediately is like, okay, I'm not supposed to be seeing this. He covers his eyes and he takes off his chadar, and he kind of drapes it down the well and says, grab the end of the chadar and I'll pull you up. So then he's pulling her up like that, and then when she gets close enough, he gets hold of her hand and he pulls her out. So of course he notices that she's a very beautiful girl, and she also, as soon as she takes his hand, she says, now that you've taken my hand, this means that we have to be married, because I've never been touched by a man before. I won't be touched by anyone except my husband. You've touched me, you've taken my hand, that means you've taken my hand in marriage, you have to marry me. So Yayati's a little confused, because in those days they were very strict about the marriage happening appropriately with, the Brahmins would marry only Brahmins, the Kshatriyas would marry only Kshatriyas, or maybe a male from a higher class would marry a female from a lower class, but not vice versa. And so you had a Brahmin girl proposing to marry a Kshatriya male, which was considered inappropriate. But the backstory is that when Devayani was at home, her father was a teacher also. So Brahmins were priests and they were also teachers. So he was teaching. And there was one student that Devayani kind of got a crush on, this boy, this Brahmin boy who was learning from her father. And she told her father that she wanted to marry him. And so this boy, he thought, I can't possibly marry the daughter of my guru. He saw her as practically on the level of his guru, right? Because that's how a disciple should see the family members of the guru. And so he declined out of respect, actually. But she became angry because she felt rejected. And then she cursed him, this boy that she wanted to marry. She cursed him that all the knowledge that her father had taught him, he would forget when he needed it. So he was upset about that because he'd spent years learning, and now all his knowledge was rendered useless. So he counter-cursed her, and he said, well, because you've acted like this, then I curse you that you will never marry a Brahmin. So she thought, I have to marry a Kshatriya, and this is going to be very difficult. So she considered this whole thing providential, that this Kshatriya had come, he'd taken her hand, he was an attractive male, he was also attracted to her, so it was basically agreed upon in the moment. But then, because they weren't married yet, then she went home and he went back to his place. So Devayani goes home, and then she complains to her father, Shukracharya, that this, Sharmista, she insulted me and she pushed me into a well. So then Shukracharya, like any father, when he realized that such a, horrible thing happened to his daughter, he got upset, and then he marched straight over with Devayani with him to the home of Vrishaparva, Sharmista's father. And so Vrishaparva was a disciple of Shukracharya, so he had caught wind of what had happened, so he was expecting this. And as soon as he saw Shukracharya, he came running out of the house. He paid his full dandavats there in the dust at his lotus feet. He was begging forgiveness. So then Shukracharya kind of softened up. His anger subsided. And then he just said, my daughter's been insulted. This needs to be rectified. So, what do you intend to do? And Vrishabharva said, just tell her to ask whatever she wants, and we'll go with that. So then Devayani made her request that, yes, I'm going to marry King Yayati, and I want this Sharmister to accompany me as my maidservant. And she'll be my servant for the rest of her life in the palace. And accompanied with all of her maidservants, because she was a princess, so she had her own maidservants. So then her father had to agree. So then Yayati and Devayani got married, and Sharmister became a household maidservant. She was living in the service quarters. At the time of the marriage, though, Shukracharya met with Sharmister, and he said that this will work on one condition. Oh, he told the king. No, he told the king. He told Yayati. He didn't tell Sharmister. He told Yayati that, I will condone this on one condition, and that you will never lie in the same bed as Sharmister. In other words, you won't unite with her in a sexual way. So then Yayati agreed. So years went by, and they were living like that, and Devayani gave birth to 2 sons, and then Sharmister, she's serving, she's living in the servants' quarters like a maid, but then, she is seeing that Devayani has these nice, beautiful sons, and she has no children, nor any hope of ever having children. She becomes very distressed, and so she approaches Yayati, and she says, dear king, I'm living here in your palace, you need to give me protection, I'm very disturbed, I want to have a child. And so Yayati, because he's also lustful, which is part of this problem, as you'll see, he thinks, well, it's also the duty of a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya cannot say no to a woman who approaches him in this way, and I'm also attracted to her, and it is a religious thing because she doesn't just want to enjoy, she wants a child. Every woman should have a right to have a child. I can't deprive her of that human need. And so he unites with her, and she ends up having 3 sons in secret. So, but later on, Devayani gets to know that Sharmister is pregnant and she has children, and so she goes back to her father, and she's furious that she disobeyed. This is not working out well. This is defeating the whole purpose. I feel again cheated by this girl. So then Shukracharya calls Yayati, and he says, Yayati, you're so lustful. Why couldn't you control your senses? You agreed, you vowed something to me, and then you just broke the vow. What is this? And so he said, because you're so lustful, I curse you. A lot of cursing going on this past time. I curse you to become an old invalid, to just be old and invalid, so that because in old age lust is a little less, and even if you do have lust, the body is you can't act on it because the body is not physically capable anymore. It's just as a bedridden old man. So then he said, oh no, this is terrible. What am I going to do? This is going to stop my progress in this form of life because I still have desires and now I can't fulfill them. So he was kind of lamenting, and he also brought up the fact that, what have you done? Now your daughter has an old, useless husband. And so when Shukracharya realized that in cursing Yayati, he had inadvertently cursed his own daughter, then he said, okay, so then I'll give you a little concession. If you can find someone who will exchange their youth for your old age, then you can have their youth, and you'll be free from old age. So then Yayati said, all right, no problem, this is going to work. I have 5 sons, and the son has to obey the instruction of the father, so I'm going to approach my sons. So that's where we leave off. We're going to start this section with Yayati approaching his sons. And first he approaches the eldest son, who is Yadu. Okay, so let's go to text 40, and we'll just,
Just wondering, Yadu, when we call Krishna Yadava, referring to the Yadu dynasty, this is that Yadu.
Yeah, this is that Yadu. So it's really crazy. If you read this 9th canto and you hear about all the ancestors of Krishna in his dynasty, There's a lot of madness that goes on. There's like Karuva and Urvashi, there's Yayati and Devayani, there's, yeah.
So this begins the Yadu dynasty. Yadu
Yeah.
is the beginning of the Yadu dynasty.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why what's going to happen, what you're going to see happening now happens. So I guess I'll just read these. I don't know if there's a. You have a mic?
Yes, good.
You just speak loudly.
Okay, go ahead then. Yeah, someone please read text 40, translation only.
We usually just go back and forth, men and ladies.
Okay, Ajit.
I do reply, my dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity. For unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation.
So, Yadu refuses. That's his reason. We'll get back to that with the purport. And text 41.
O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati similarly requested his son Durvasu, Druhu, and Anu to exchange their youth for his old age. But because they were unaware of religious principles, they thought that their flickering youth was eternal, and therefore they refused to carry out their father's order.
So, all the sons of, so far, all 4 out of the 5 sons refused. And now?
King Yayati then requested Guru, who was younger and his 3 brothers but more qualified. My dear son, do not be so disobedient like your elder brothers, for that is not your duty.
Guru replied, O your majesty, who in this world replied it is left with his father, but by the mercy of one's father, one can send him on the throne of life, which is ineffable, but we honor, not the shame of the superior.
A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants him to do is first class. One who acts upon receiving his father's order is second class. And one who executes his father's order irreverently is third class. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's
Prabhupada says in the purport that the sun and the urine come from the same place. So a son who disobeys the order of the father is considered to be urine. Okay, last one.
Sukadeva Goswami said, in this way, O Maharaja Parishit, the son named Guru, was very pleased to accept the old age of his father, Yayati, who took the youth of his son and enjoyed this material world as he required.
Okay, so the youngest son, Puru, agreed. And we hear about the importance of sons following the orders of the father. But Yadu, so Puru agreed. The 3 middle brothers refused, but they did it based on, because of their sense gratification. They thought, we don't want old age, we want to enjoy our youth. But Yadu also refused, but not for sense gratification. He had 2 very important reasons for not accepting his father's old age. So let's go back to text 40 and find out what those are. Shri Yadu Vacha Notsahe Jarasastatum Antara Praptayatava Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitstrishnyam Naiti Purushaha Shri Yaduvacha Notsahe Jarasastatum Antara Praptayatava Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitstrishnyam Naiti Purushaha. Please chant.
Shri Yaduvacha
Natsahe Jarasastatum
Natsahe Jarasastatum
Antara
Praptayatava
Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitstrishnyam
Shri Adu Yuvacha.
Shri Aruvacha.
Notsahe Jarasa Jatam.
Nosahe Jarasasatum.
Antara Praktaya Tava.
Antara Praptaya Tava.
Viditva Sukham Gramyam.
Aveditva Sukham Gramyam.
Vaitrishnam Naiti Purusha.
Vaitrishnam Naiti Purusha.
Shri
Shri Aruvacha.
Nosahe Jarasastatu.
Nosahe Jarasasatum.
Antara Praktaya Tava.
Antara Praptaya Tava.
Avitya Sukham Gramyam.
Aveditva Sukham Gramyam.
Vaishishyam Naiti Purusha.
Yeah, so let's do the word for word all together. Shri Yaduvacha. Yadu, the eldest son of Yayati, replied, Notsahe, I am not enthusiastic. Janasa, with your old age and invalidity. Statum, to remain. Antara, while in youth. Praktaya, accepted. Tava, your. Aviditva, without experiencing. Sukham, happiness. Gramyam, material or bodily. Vaishishnam, indifference to material enjoyment. Na, does not. Iti, attain. Purusha, a person. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Yadu replied, My dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Report. Renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. Therefore, the Varnashram institution is most scientific. It aims at giving one the facility to return home back to Godhead, which one cannot do without completely renouncing all connections with the material world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajanon Mukasya. One who wants to go back home, back to Godhead, must be niskinchana, free from all affinity for material enjoyment. Brahman Yupasha Mashrayam. Unless one is fully renounced, one cannot engage in devotional service or stay in Brahman. Devotional service is rendered on the Brahman platform. Therefore, unless one attains the Brahman platform or spiritual platform, one cannot engage in devotional service. Or in other words, a person engaged in devotional service is already on the Brahman platform. Vamchayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityayan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14:26. If one attains devotional service, therefore he is certainly liberated. Generally, unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Varnashram therefore gives the opportunity for gradual elevation. Yadu, the son of Maharaj Yayati, explained that he was unable to give up his youth, for he wanted to use it to attain the renounced order in the future. Maharaj Yadu was different from his brothers. As stated in the next verse, Tuavashush Charita Pitra Druyus Chanus Chavarata Pratyachakyur Adharma Gya. Maharaj Yadu's brothers refused to accept their father's proposal because they were not completely aware of Dharma. To accept orders that follow religious principles, especially the order of one's father, is very important. Therefore, when the brothers of Maharaj Yadu refused their father's order, this was certainly irreligious. Maharaj Yadu's refusal, however, was religious. As stated in the 10th canto, Yadosh Cha Dharma Shilasya. Maharaj Yadu was completely aware of the principles of religion. The ultimate principle of religion is to engage oneself in devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was very eager to engage himself in the Lord's service, but there was an impediment. During youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present, and unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there is a chance of one's being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. We have actually seen that many sannyasis who accept sannyas prematurely, not having satisfied their material desires, fall down because they are disturbed. Therefore, the general process is to go through grihastha life and vanaprastha life and finally come to sannyas and devote oneself completely to the service of the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was ready to accept his father's order and exchange youth for old age because he was confident that the youth taken by his father would be returned. But because this exchange would delay his complete engagement in devotional service, he did not want to accept his father's old age, for he was eager to achieve freedom from disturbances. Moreover, among the descendants of Yadu would be Lord Krishna. Therefore, because Yadu was eager to see the Lord's appearance in his dynasty as soon as possible, Yadu refused to accept his father's proposal. This was not irreligious, however, because Yadu's purpose was to serve the Lord. Because Yadu was a faithful servant of the Lord, Lord Krishna appeared in his dynasty. As confirmed in the prayers of Kunti, Yadu Priyas Yan Gavaye. Yadu was very dear to Krishna, who was therefore eager to descend in Yadu's dynasty. In conclusion, Maharaj Yadu should not be considered a dharmagya, ignorant of religious principles, as the next verse designated his brothers. He was like the 4 Sanakas, Chatu Sana, who refused the order of their father, Brahma, for the sake of a better cause. Because the 4 Kumaras wanted to engage themselves completely in the service of the Lord as brahmacharis, their refusal to obey their father's order was not irreligious. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here what we're seeing is the principle of that it's okay to violate a lower principle for the sake of a higher principle. And Prabhupada gives the example of the 4 Kumaras. So they were the first sons of Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma was on a mission to populate the universe. And so he needed to have descendants who would marry and have children so that souls could come into the material world and, make progress and go back to Godhead. But the 4 Kumaras were like, we don't want to get married, we don't want to go into family life, we don't want to be grihastas, we just want to stay brahmachari forever. And Brahma wasn't happy with them at all. So they were so determined to not get married that by their mystic powers they maintained themselves as young 5-year-old boys for the rest of their lives in this world. So Lord Brahma wasn't happy. But it wasn't irreligious because it was a higher principle. The higher principle is we want to devote our lives just fully to serving the Lord. We don't want to get distracted by anything. Because when you enter Grihastha ashram, it's like you have so many responsibilities, right? To earn money, you have to pay bills, you have to take care of children and all these things. And sometimes it becomes distracting and entangling. You no longer do direct, service the same way you could have if you were in the temple as a brahmachari, just full-time service like that. So this principle of breaking a lower principle for a higher principle, it manifests in different ways throughout scriptures and throughout the activities of great personalities. Can you think of any other examples? Yeah.
There was Krishna who broke his promise to not fight the war in order to protect his devotee.
Okay, good. Yeah, so Krishna himself breaks a principle, breaks his own vow. And so the principle is, if you take a vow, you need to follow your vow. Like vows should not be broken. And he took a vow not to fight, and yet when he saw that Bhishma was going to kill Arjuna, then he took up the chariot wheel, which is not exactly a weapon, but still he was charging forth with that wheel to fight. And he would have killed Bhishma if he had to to protect Arjuna. Yeah, good one. Thank you.
The wives of the Brahmanas?
The wives of the Brahmanas, okay, good, because the duty of the wife is to obey the husband, to stay under the protection of the husband, and yet they just totally rejected their husband's advice. Even they were trying to restrain them, and they broke through and went to deliver food to Krishna and Balaram, because the highest principle is to serve the Lord, right? If your husband's telling you don't serve the Lord, then the high road is to disobey the husband and serve the Lord. Good example, thank you. Yes?
Arjuna gives many reasons in the first chapter of the Gita why he shouldn't fight, which are lower principles. And the higher principle is Krishna has his plan to remove the demoniac leaders. And so Arjuna fought on that principle.
Yeah, good. Yeah, he's giving so many good reasons, like I'm going to incur sin, the women are going to be unprotected, there's going to be unwanted children, it's going to be the end of all these social customs and religious traditions, and yeah, and Krishna said, don't worry about it. This is a higher principle. Fight for me. Yeah.
Very much rejected his spiritual master to
Mhm.
serve Lord Rama.
Good, yeah. So Shukracharya, same Shukracharya that we're talking about, had told him, don't give charity to this Vamanadev, because he's going to cheat you. And because he's actually Lord Vishnu, he just looks like a little dwarf Brahman. He's actually Lord Vishnu, and he's going to take everything. And then, so the disciples should follow the order of the spiritual master, but then the higher principle is, wait, aren't we supposed to offer everything to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Isn't that like the goal of life, is to give it everything, our whole lives, in service of the Lord? So I can't follow that, I'm sorry. Yes. Good, nice example. There's so many examples. Even Srila Prabhupada, right, there's a rule that sannyasi should not cross the ocean. But Srila Prabhupada crossed the ocean many times, right? He circumambulated the planet 14 times. So that was his breaking a principle. And yeah, Sanatana Goswami also, a devotee should be truthful. But then Sanatana Goswami basically told a lie to the Nawab that I'm sick and therefore I can't come to work. But actually he was perfectly healthy and he was just having Bhagavad Gita at his home. But the higher principle is, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, associate with devotees rather than, show up for work on time. Yeah.
This is the story of this Mataji who cooked khichdi for Jagannath, but
Mm.
did not follow all the rules and regulations or take a bath. Then the Brahmana tried to correct her, but then the Brahmana got a dream that you do not do anything, do not correct anything.
Yeah, so the higher principle is to act with pure love and devotion, even if all the little standards are not followed. There's even one instance where one devotee, a sannyasi disciple of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada instructed him to go and preach in Eastern Europe. And at that time, there were no temples, no devotees in Eastern Europe, and because northern Eastern Europe is quite cold. I can't remember the exact country he was sent to, but he didn't want to go, basically. He was, happy being in the temple where he was with the devotees and like that. He didn't want to go all alone to a new place. And anyway, so he was giving excuses to Prabhupada to try to get out of it. And one of the excuses he gave was that, Srila Prabhupada, it's so cold there, no vegetables grow, there's only meat to eat there. I won't be able to eat anything. And then Srila Prabhupada said, then eat meat, but preach. So that's like pretty extreme, right? But it's showing that, of course, fortunately, we don't have to follow that. And he didn't either. He ended up going and finding that there were plenty of vegetables there because, even if it is a cold country, like Canada, is also a pretty cold country, but we import vegetables from other places. So like that. But the principle was that you can break a lower principle for a higher principle. And to give Krishna conscious people, to save them from going to lower species, going to hellish life in the future, then even if you have to incur some sinful reaction, which you won't because you're doing it in a mood of total surrender, so Krishna will free you, right? Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shukchaha. But that can be broken. Yeah. Rohan?
Krishna kidnapping Rukmani Devi. That's also breaking principle. Like we should not go and kidnap Baba.
We shouldn't kidnap.
Yeah.
But if you're God and that's your eternal consort, then it's okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Nice examples. Thank you. So here with Yadu, we're seeing that he disobeyed his father for two very important higher principles. So one was that he was thinking about his ultimate desire to renounce. And he's thinking that if I don't go through Grihastha ashram, then I'm not going to be able to purify these desires. So he was recognizing within himself that I have a lot of material desires. I want to enjoy my senses. Particularly, he had a very strong sex desire. And he's thinking, if I'm not able to fulfill this through, religiously, through Grihastha ashram, then it's not going to be purified and I won't be able to renounce. So, and he wanted to attain that position of renunciation sooner rather than later. So he saw the Grihastha ashram not as an end as itself, but just as a purificatory stage that he had to pass through so that he could become renounced, which was his goal. And if he took the old age now, then that would be a delay, because who knows how long he would have to be old before his father, got tired of sense gratification or left his body, and then he would get his youth back. But there could be, decades where he was just old and invalid, and then later he would get his youth back, but it would be, his renunciation would be delayed. So this is an important consideration for anyone who's a brahmachari and considering remaining in brahmachari ashram, is that, some brahmacharis can do it, and some, as we've seen, there are many brahmacharis that they'll be practicing, brahmachari for years and maybe decades, and then they get to age, 40, 45, and they're like, oh no, I have these desires and I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be able to go back to Godhead because I wasn't able to purify these desires, and I can't be a sannyasi because it's just too strong, and what am I going to do? I don't want to be a hypocrite just wearing saffron and, harboring these desires and being frustrated and grumpy and irritable and, so they end up getting married at at the age when you should be actually moving towards vanaprastha, and so it's not the best thing. So it's important to really be very introspective during youth and be like, can I actually do this? Consult with senior devotees, be very honest, and make sure that that anyone wants to stay brahmachari is doing it for the right reasons, and that's actually going to be the best course of action. Otherwise, you end up getting married at age 40, 45, having children. You can't renounce until your children are grown up, so then your children won't be grown up until you're like 70, and then it's like difficult. So, so that's why, Yadu was being very honest with himself. He's like, I have desires, I need to fulfill these desires, I want to get this out of my system as quickly as possible so that I can take sannyas, so that I can dedicate myself fully in pure consciousness to serving the Lord, and I don't want any delays to that. So that was one higher principle for which he refused to obey his father. And then the other principle is that somehow he knew that Krishna was going to take birth in his dynasty. And he thought, well, if Krishna is going to take birth in my dynasty, then I need to have children. And the sooner I have children, the sooner my children are going to have children, the sooner their children are going to have children, the sooner Krishna is going to appear. So I need to have children as soon as possible so that Krishna can appear as soon as possible. And I don't want this to be delayed by spending decades as an old man and then later getting married. So for that reason too, he refused. So these are two definitely higher principles. Yes, I did.
It's like a practical question. Is it that he takes on the age also, or he remains the same age but just like has a body? Is it that he's going to die soon because now he's old?
No, because the deal is that he's going to get his youth back eventually.
Oh, okay.
So and that happened with Puru even. So with Puru, he took on the old age, and then after a while Yayati, and you'll read about that in upcoming chapters, how Yayati just got totally disgusted with sense gratification. He's like, you know what, this is ridiculous. He also preaches to Devayani, like, we should just get over this, move on, become renounced. And so then he gives his youth back to Puru, and then Puru goes on, and he becomes the head of the Puru dynasty, which becomes the core of a dynasty in which Dhritarashtra and all of them take birth. Maharaj?
Okay. I have two questions. One, it looks like the opinion of Yadu is in favor of Daksha, Narada Muni transform over his son into sannyasis.
Yeah.
And then Daksha said, I'm a better sannyasi than you, what are you doing? This is not right. You have to go through sanctification and then become sannyas. So it looks like it's in favor of Daksha's opinion, so how do you reconcile this?
Yeah. So the thing is that because Narada Muni was preaching to the sons of Daksha, right? To just renounce. What are you doing? You're performing austerities so that you can be good grihastas. you should be performing austerities so that you can, be good devotees. Just dedicate yourself totally to the service of Krishna by following the processes of bhakti. So the difference is that Narada Muni was preaching bhakti, right? He was a Shakti Vesh avatar, and the Shakti that he was empowered with was Bhakti Shakti. So whenever Narada was preaching to anyone, his mercy came in the form of bhakti. He was guiding people on the path of bhakti. So bhakti is so powerful, such a powerful process, that if one really dedicates themselves strictly to the principles of bhakti, then they don't have to get married. These material desires, even sex desire, which is the most deeply rooted, can be purified by tivrena bhakti yogena. Right? That's why that verse says that akama sarva kama va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusha param. That even if you are full of material desires, just take to bhakti with great intensity, with focus, concentration, determination, and everything will be sorted out, everything will be purified. But any other religious process, if it's gyan, if it's karma, if it's yoga, it's not going to work. So it doesn't burn out material desires to the root. It doesn't uproot them. It only cuts them down. It's like mowing the grass, right? So there are weeds growing up. These material desires are like weeds in the garden of our heart. And so someone might come along and just, with a weed whacker and just, cut the weeds down to the ground level. But then what happens in time, they're going to grow back. So other processes are like that. They cut them down. It's like, okay, not disturbed by that. But then they grow back, and then you need to keep, again and again being disturbed by those desires, and again trying to do your yoga or your karma or your gyan to put them down. But they stay in the heart, so they keep coming up. But bhakti is the only process that actually uproots them. So if you uproot the weeds, then you throw them away, then there's no way that they can come back. And talks about that in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Narada was giving bhakti. So he was sure that these young men, if they just follow what I'm teaching them, bhakti is so powerful that they don't need to go through Grihastha ashram, because their material desires will be, they don't need to burn them out by indulging in them and being disgusted with them. They can burn them out just by Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, 9 processes of devotional service. Yes, Maharaj.
This exchange of youth for old age,
Mm-hmm.
is there any example in history about this? Example of this? I don't find this.
Apart from this example?
Yes. Is that possible nowadays?
Oh. Do you want to try it? Funny. There's a lot of young people here, Maharaj. can do a trade. I don't know. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. Some example we see in history.
Yeah. I mean, this was a special thing because, it was a boon given by Shukracharya. I think by ordinary mystic powers, otherwise people would do it all the time. Actually, no. Well, there's Chavana Muni, but he didn't exchange, he just made himself younger. Remember Chavana Muni and Sukanya? So she poked the glowworms, and then her father was like, oh no, you just hurt the sage, now you need to marry him. But he was old and invalid as well, and she was young. So there's this
So, Shogari Muni also.
Shogari Muni?
Shogari Muni.
Was he another example?
No, he also became young.
Oh yeah, he was meditating underwater and he got old and wrinkled and pruny, and then no one wanted to marry him, but then he made himself young. So people can make themselves young, but I never heard of exchanging youth, exchanging old age for youth. Yeah, interesting. Priya?
Questions are okay?
Yeah, I'm fine as long as you guys are.
Okay, cool. So we hear about, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, saying that my house has become the spiritual world.
Yeah.
Grihe Tako, no. Anyway.
Yeah, Grihe Tako,
Sadahari
Sadahari
Bodhidharma.
Bodhidharma.
Yeah, it's not so important which ashram. And here in this context, it sounds like one message is that the path of renunciation is more favorable because you can do full devotional service. You kind of that's the way I heard it from you.
Yeah.
So how do we understand these other types of statements about family life?
Yeah, good. I mean, so this is another glory of bhakti. There's two sides to the glories of bhakti. One glory of bhakti is that you can just do bhakti and you can go straight through without grihastha ashram and get the same purification that you would in grihastha ashram if your bhakti is very, if your sadhana is very good. The other glory of bhakti is that even in grihastha ashram, you can be totally renounced and a Mahabhagavat and totally Krishna conscious. So grihastha ashram doesn't necessarily have to be a distraction from your renunciation. And that's what there's at one purport in Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada says that. He says that in any other path, in karma or jnana or yoga, it's in the 6th chapter where Krishna is saying, he's outlining Ashtanga Yoga, and he's saying that you have to practice complete celibacy. So in these other forms of yoga or jnana or karma, you can't achieve perfection in those paths unless you observe complete celibacy throughout your whole life. And Prabhupada says, but bhakti is so powerful that even grihastas can attain the supreme perfection of life in the grihastha ashram by practicing bhakti. So the point is that with bhakti, you can't go wrong. Whether you get married, you can still become a pure devotee and go back to Godhead. Whether you don't get married, you can still be purified of all your material desires and go back to Godhead. So bhakti is like the safe way. That just it's basically what's the word? Like it can't fail. Yeah.
And then just a quick follow-up.
The question is whether we're going to do it sincerely and properly.
Yes, so my question is, what does sincere and proper look like? In your experience, seeing devotees go through different ashrams, what is it that differentiates the brahmacharis who can stick with it and become a sannyasi, the grihastas who can be very fixed up, still preaching, still very nicely situated?
Yeah. It's, when your desire to fulfill your material needs for sense gratification becomes stronger than your desire to serve the Lord. When it gets to the point where this desire is so strong, I have to fulfill it one way or another, even I'm willing to leave the association of devotees if that's what it takes for me to fulfill this desire. When it becomes that strong, then get yourself married, right? Because that will keep you in, Grihastha ashram will save you from leaving. Because we see that many devotees leave. Even sannyasis have fallen down with non-devotee women and run off and left the association devotees, given up devotional service, because the desire to enjoy sex life is stronger than the desire to serve Krishna. So it's very dangerous. Ajay has a
I just thought about this, we have to enjoy material happiness. So maybe like brahmachari who can stay renounced his whole life, we can assume that he's enjoyed in the past life enough or something, or like he's enjoyed enough to realize this isn't it.
Yeah, generally. He's worked through those desires,
Yeah, it's like, I just first really go, it's like, okay, I've been there, done that, now let me just get my life.
Yeah.
But those of us who can't do that, we still have something to experience, some desires to fulfill, just to realize that that's not actually what's going to satisfy.
Yeah, the whole point of Grihastha ashram is to realize that it's not what you want. But yeah, it's like, that's what Prabhupada says, first class intelligence, second class intelligence, third class intelligence. So first class intelligence is just here. Just don't go there. It's not favorable for your Krishna consciousness. But then second class intelligence is that, okay, do it and you learn your lesson and then go on and be renounced. And so at least we should be second class intelligence, right? That we learn the lesson. But the thing is, Grihastha ashram also has to be done properly. Otherwise you don't get purified. Because the nature of lust is that, the more you indulge in it, the more it just fuels the fire. We were hearing that yesterday from Lust Personified, right? On the stage. That's how she cheats. That's how lust cheats the conditioned soul. Is if you just gratify me, then I'll leave you alone. No, it's not. It's like you're putting fuel on the fire, and the fire blazes higher. So, if married life is just all about just sex and sense gratification, then it doesn't actually purify the desires, it fuels them. So that's why Grihastha ashram is different from Grihamedi ashram. Grihamedi ashram is just focused on, basically sex life and all that comes with it. Whereas Grihastha ashram is focused on Krishna, and the sex life is restricted and regulated according to, religious principles. But the focus is on, we're trying to serve Krishna together, we want to have Krishna conscious children, we want to purify ourselves, and we need this situation because we have this attachment, but we're supporting each other to work through it. And then the purification happens. Continuing with your sadhana, continuing to try to serve the mission of the spiritual master and the Lord. Yes, Bruce?
Something I think about sometimes is, if I stay brahmachari, I'll be able to reach so many more people than if I go into grihastha. And so I guess my question is, if I go into grihastha, will I still have this, is it possible I could still have the same opportunity to bring more conditioned souls into Krishna consciousness? Because I feel like as a brahmachari, you just have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, you have to see it's a balance between what you yourself personally need to stay strong in spiritual life, and then the way that you want to serve Krishna. Right? Because to serve Krishna for a lifetime requires strength. Right? And we hear in the pastime of Gajendra earlier on in this same canto, right? The 9th canto, chapters 4, like that. There's Gajendra Moksha Lila. So there's one purport there that Prabhupada wrote where he talks about how the reason that Gajendra's an elephant, and he was bit by a crocodile. So an elephant is a lot stronger than a crocodile. But because he was bit while he was in the river, apparently it was deep water, so elephants are not animals of the water, they're land animals. So because he was in an unfavorable situation, he was out of his element, then he was weak. And so he wasn't able to actually defeat the crocodile. He was going to die in the jaws of this crocodile. So the purport, Prabhupada says that we need to be, he particularly brings up this topic, that we need to be situated in the ashram in which we are most strong. And what is best, what's the best ashram for one person is not necessarily the best ashram for another person. So, and Prabhupada wrote this purport very compassionately just after one of his disciples had fallen down from sannyas and had gotten married. And Prabhupada was very compassionately saying that this wasn't the ideal thing, it's not good for a sannyasi to fall down, but he was approving that, okay, just be in the position of strength. Like, as a sannyasi, he was weak, he was always just struggling, he was unable to maintain his sannyas vows, and so the right thing to do was to get married, be in a position of strength where you have that support, you have resources, you have, all the things that Grihastha ashram affords you with, and then you can preach. But don't give up the mission. Don't give up your Krishna. That's what he says, Prabhupada. Don't give up your Krishna consciousness. So we have to see, are you stronger as a brahmachari? Will you be stronger as a grihastha? Or, what is your position of strength? What do you need to be strong in spiritual life so that you can go on with the mission? Okay? And that's different for each person, yeah.
I think we should close off. The devotees from Bhakti Academy are leaving in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jai. Thank you all so much. Grandra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanand.
Haribol.